just look at what the BRICS are doing. I mean, they're opening storage facilities, refineries. They're very serious about accumulating both gold and silver. And it makes sense because, for years and years, they had, I guess the metaphor is tons. They had tons of dollars on their books. And now they're adding tons of real money on their balance sheet.
And you also see this here in the United States. They've outlined silver as part of critical minerals, as part of the critical minerals list, let's say. And I mean, you made the point earlier on before we hit record. Every one of these Tomahawk missiles, they fire off into Russia or wherever. I mean, that's a monster box of silver just gone completely off the game board.
Right. Yeah, I forget what the number is. It's something like 473 ounces or something like that. But yeah, that's silver that's obliterated. Can never be reclaimed. And this in a market that is now in its fifth year of a structural deficit, supply and demand deficit.
And silver is a very unique market because, number one, it's very small. So if there were manipulators out there, they'd want to manipulate the silver market as opposed to the gold market. It's much easier to move the silver price up and down. But I mean, what are some of the dangers? I mean, what are some of the dangers present in the silver market right now? I mean, are they losing control of their price manipulation schemes? I mean, and what are the signs that they are or are not losing control?
Right. Well, obviously, price tells you that they're losing control, but let's not even talk about price. We did mention that we're in a structural deficit. We've had a supply and demand deficit for 5 years, and that's what happens when you get a small market size-wise as far as dollar amounts. I mean, the total production globally is only like $30 billion a year. But when you get a small market that's easy to manipulate, and if you're constantly manipulating to the downside and suppressing the price, what that does is it makes it much more difficult for producers to earn a profit, so they mine less silver. So, a direct consequence is the fact that we're in a structural supply deficit. Other things to look at, you can look at the lease rate on silver. You can look at the lease rate and the amount of shorts available on SLV, which is strictly paper. That's not actual physical silver. But the rates to borrow, it's blowing the shorts. The shorts are being blown up. I've said for years that on gold and silver, the numbers that we're going to go to are higher than anyone has projected of any number for gold or any number for silver. The actual number, I'm convinced, is going to be far higher than the most optimistic projection there is. And the reason being, gold and silver what they've done is they've sold paper contracts against gold and against silver that don't exist. And we're going to move into a failure to deliver scenario. And when that happens, man is a funny animal. When you tell man he can't have something, he wants it that much more.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're talking literally trillions of dollars that are going to be dislodged from the stock market, from the bond market, even from the crypto markets. And all that money is going to be pointed toward gold and silver. Those markets, I mean, especially silver being so small, they cannot handle the type of capital that's going to be heading toward a safe haven or these safe havens. And one other aspect of man, fear is the greatest emotion there is. And people are going to be moving money into gold and silver, not out of greed because, I could buy gold at 50 and I can sell it at 100 or 200 or whatever. That's not going to be the motivator. The motivator is going to be fear of losing everything in other markets and putting that money into something that is a safe haven and cannot bankrupt. That's the whole key. They can't bankrupt in a world that is defaulting.
Well, you remember the big lines that we saw a month ago in China and in Australia and in other parts of the
Right.
world where people were just waiting like blocks and blocks, in line from the entranceway of these different bullion sites. And that was, I mean, there was no shortage of silver or gold or anything of that matter. It was just a huge price spike. One could argue that, was mainly
And there
driven
was
by,
a shortage.
go ahead.
There was
Oh,
a
okay.
shortage.
That's true. There was
There
in
were
China.
shortages. There
Yes,
were
that's
there
true.
was in China, but also there were limits on the amount that customers could cash and carry out.
Mm.
So they did try to ration what supply they had.
Yeah, and that's like a very like that's just a fraction of the kind of scenario that we're kind of thinking up in our heads, because there's no real I mean, there was no danger of the fiat currencies are devaluing. You look at the the money supplies of the US dollar, the RMB, the euro, the Japanese yen, all of them. I mean, they're all going up at the same time, but there's no real imminent threat that your currency is going to be devalued to the point where you have to go out and spend whatever you have and procure the metals ASAP. But I mean, that was a very small sample of what was to come, and it was pretty big. I mean, those lines were pretty big. I mean, especially in Asia.
Right. Well, the biggest lines you don't see, and I don't see, nobody sees them. The biggest lines are the electronic lines.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, once you get full-fledged movement from, family offices, hedge funds, um, they're smelling blood in the water. Once we get to that point, it's going to make what we've already seen look like not even just barely a starter.
Yeah, and we're already starting to see crypto sell off. Bitcoin is down to 90,000 or 90,000 some odd dollars, but gold and silver have both held on fairly steadily. It appears that crypto is highly correlated to the Nasdaq, which is atypical of a safe haven asset like gold, and to a somewhat of an extent to silver as well. Silver does have some industrial usage too, but when I look at silver and I hear these arguments that silver is more industrial than monetary, but doesn't the fact that silver have utility kind of make it more valuable than gold, or the fact that silver has more utility than gold, shouldn't that make it more valuable? I mean, holding the supply side constant.
Yeah, well, silver's got many, many uses. It's not just industrial. I mean, you've got technological, you have medicinal. Um, I mean, go back hundreds of years. You remember the term, he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Well, only the wealthy people could afford silverware. And the reason they used silverware was because the antibacterial
Properties.
the antibacterial that properties of silver. Right, exactly. Gold is basically strictly money, and silver for several thousand years was also money, but it has other uses. It has more uses than any other element on the planet.